I'm a proud NTAE key informant working with Extension Foundation, and love seeing all the comments coming in from you all across the country as far as your roles, what's interesting to you relative to AI, business development, and fundraising. And as Charlie mentioned, this is the final seventh part of a seven-part series that we started way back in January. So it's hard to believe that we've made it to the midpoint in the year. Today's conversation, admittedly, is going to be more not theoretical, but I want to give you some frameworks or some ways of thinking about, because the landscape is changing so rapidly, as Charlie mentioned, how can you as extension executives, professionals, practitioners, researchers, et cetera, use these tools, obviously not get too wedded per se to any one tool, but rather really understand how can I vet and study and understand what's possible. What does my institution allow? How do I navigate difficult conversations to figure out how we can strategically experiment? And so I don't admittedly have a lot of demonstrations today. I know we've done a lot of demoing different AI tools, ChatGPT and Gemini, et cetera, in the past. We will have time toward the end of today's session for Q&A demonstration. So if there are really specific granular questions or just big picture things, I would love any of your questions because I think we're going to have quite a bit of time for that. This session is scheduled to run until 2:15 Central. That's 3:15 Eastern. For those on the West Coast, I think that would be like, 12:15 Pacific time. So or if you're in the Mountain Time Zone, I apologize. It's like 1:15. But at any rate, we'll go through these frameworks that I've mentioned, and then again, drop those questions in. Use the Q&A feature, or if you have a comment or something to share, drop that in the chat, and Charlie and I will be checking that regularly. And again, we want this to be your time. So, I'm happy to share what I know. And, I am certainly far from the world's foremost expert on any of these topics, but what I hope I can do from my own experience working in my business and with nonprofits and educators is just give you some food for thought. And again, some of this may be super obvious, but again, if nothing else, maybe it reinforces the path that you're already on. All right. So when we talk about future proofing, what am I talking about, right? Well, if we had any learning objectives for today's session, I think these three items are probably it, right? So we want to talk a little bit about emerging AI capabilities, right? We've spent a lot of time over the past several months addressing things like using AI as a writing assistant, as a research partner to identify prospective funders of the kind of work you do, in your local community. How do you, set meetings with them? How do you have conversations? How do you demonstrate impact? We've talked about using AI as a data analysis tool, like going through reams of survey data, pulling out insights, using that for impact reporting, for guiding your strategy. And so again, I would encourage you, as Charlie did, to go back and watch those previous videos. And if you have specific questions, obviously would love for you to reach out to me. I think it's nateburt@extension.org. Would be happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you as well and dive deeper. But again, we're going to talk a little bit about emerging capabilities at a high level thematically, just so you kind of see the lay of the land if you're not spending every waking moment studying how this landscape is changing. And I certainly don't expect that. Number two, I want to give you some guidelines for evaluating new tools. Now, when I say new tools, I don't just mean a brand new AI that's going to rival, Copilot. What I'm talking about is maybe it's new tools that are very specific to educators or researchers, or maybe it is new capabilities embedded within something like a ChatGPT or a Gemini. When those capabilities become available, you've got some questions to ask, right? You've got some ethical questions. You've got some maybe legal questions, or regulatory is a stretch, but there may be guardrails inside of the institution where you work. And you may have some personal questions or concerns as well. And so I want to give you some ways of thinking about that, so that when you hear about this flashy new tool or that big announcement, you are able to quickly ascertain, is this worth investing my time and energy playing around with, right? Or should I just wait and see how things shake out in another month or two? And then thirdly, I want you to be able to make smart decisions. This sort of, again, follows from the last point, which is I want this to be relevant to you individually within your role and extension. And so, again, AI can be really fantastic. It can also be very polarizing. And as a country, as a world, we're just entering the first wave of what I think is going to be a period of upheaval. I hope it's exciting. I hope it provides a lot of benefits to society. But I can tell you, sitting here in Montgomery County, Missouri, where we have two giant data centers being built by two of the largest companies in the world, out here in rural America, data centers super controversial. Okay, and so I suspect wherever you live, you are going to experience through your clients, perhaps even with your peers and extension, a wide range of perspectives, ideas, opinions, and so it's going to be very important to really layer on that human judgment that you can uniquely bring, your knowledge of your local community, your lived experience, any past work you've done using AI tools to decide what do you believe, what's right, what's moral, what's ethical, and then to what degree can I integrate these tools to make my life easier, to make my outreach and impact more effective, get closer to the outcomes that extension is striving for. Again, that's where I think the real potential of AI is, assuming those other boxes can be checked. And so that's where we're headed today as part of today's conversation. So let's talk about future proofing. We've talked about sort of AI and extension in general, but let's talk for a moment about fundraising specifically. Why is the art of future proofing? And again, it is an art because there is no science. None of us can predict the future. None of us has a crystal ball that I'm aware of. And so in the absence of that, it relies on us to come up with systems or frameworks to guide decision making and to sort of think about, I think as Wayne Gretzky talked about, going to skating to where the puck is going. And so these are sort of four key areas that I would encourage you to think about when it comes to future proofing your business development and fundraising activities. Number one is velocity, right? In general, the large language models, generative AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, um, the tools are becoming more and more powerful in terms of their capabilities, right? You've probably seen in the news recently that the federal government has even started to step in some cases saying, whoa, we need to pause this model because we're worried about its implications for cybersecurity, right? Is it going to make it easier for people to hack into the grid or, take down websites or take down critical infrastructure like water or power? And so, I think that's the tip of the iceberg for sort of AI broadly diffusing into society. And so, it's important to understand how fast things are changing, what capabilities are emerging, because again, what was true even 3 to 6 months ago could be vastly different now. And again, I think the good news for you in fundraising and business development is that the core tools are incredible as they are. If no additional changes were ever made in history, you would still have a lot of horsepower under the hood, so to speak. But nonetheless, there may be new things that none of us have even considered, right? I mean, I'm thinking about being able to create, video reels showing the kinds of programming you want to build. And again, I would always caution you to really apply that human judgment because I think there's an awful lot of AI slop out there right now. And I think that can actually be to your detriment, right? So we have to be careful. We have to be creative, but we also need to be aware of where the tools are going. So that's velocity. Number two is expectations, right? Um, because of the fact that we now have these incredible AI tools, we have more competition than ever, right? In the corporate world and in the nonprofit and world of academia and education. And so what that means is higher levels of competition for grant funding. Again, my perspective has always been like, I think the pie of funding can get bigger, but we've got to start getting more creative, right? And so I love hearing from extension professionals about going to your local bank or coming up with an innovative new program and bringing together a set of stakeholders and funders to make it happen above and beyond federal funding, state funding, foundations, et cetera. So I think really the limiting factor on business development in the future is, what is the limit of your imagination? Having said that, there is a very real case that for funds that exist, or maybe legacy kinds of funding, more people have the ability to write a proposal, to follow all the instructions, to plug in all of the right keywords that the AI is going to be scanning for when it decides, do we advance this proposal to the next round of consideration or not? Um, I think on not just on an application standpoint, but if you think about impact reporting or showcasing the work that you're doing for funders or prospective funders, um, funders are going to want a higher level of professionalism, right? Because we have those capabilities, right? In the past, maybe you would have had to work with a dedicated research partner or a data analyst to come up with charts and grids and explanations of data points for those kinds of reports or conversations that you're having. But now we have tools that can do that for you. And again, I would never encourage you just to plug in a bunch of data and run with it. They have to be fact checked. You need to make sure that what you put in is properly anonymized and put in the proper context. That being said, though, it is going to become, I think, an expectation that if you are seeking funding, funders increasingly want to deliver outcomes. They don't just want programs or services, and they really want to see how change is happening on the landscape. And so the ability of these tools gives you the toolbox that you need to begin doing that. And of course, I always encourage you to have human experts on your team, whether that's you or someone else. But again, expectations are changing and going up because we have these capabilities sort of universally diffused, or if not universally, then well on the way to getting there. Number three, advantage. So having these tools and again, using AI as part of your fundraising is really important because it allows you to, again, stay at least competitive, if not, more than competitive, because you bring not just, I know how to use the AI tools, but I know my local community better than anyone. I'm a subject matter expert. And I think something that came up in a conversation today outside of extension entirely, but I was visiting with another small business owner talking about how the landscape of trust is changing. And I think really trust is the superpower of extension, in my opinion, among many others. And the reason I say that is because, again, AI has proliferated to the point where email outreach, LinkedIn, cold calling, placing phone calls to funders, everyone can do that. And lots of people are using AI agents or robots to do a lot of that work for them. And so it is creating an environment of an enormous amount of noise. It makes it very difficult for a funder to discern, is this someone I can trust? Do I have time for this? And so consequently, I think we're in a moment when how people make decisions about who to invest their precious time in has never been more at a premium. And so if you can use AI to maybe work behind the scenes to really fine tune your language, your framing, the questions that you're asking funders, and then really lean into that human aspect of meeting face to face. If you can do so in person, physically, even better. Finding creative and novel ways to spark conversation and build trust. To me, that is the El Dorado here, right? If we can figure that out, it's going to give you such a superior advantage. And I do think there's a real need and desire for analog, in person, slower, brain friendly kinds of conversations and dialogue that leads to funded partnerships. And so, again, I'll leave you with that. I'd love your thoughts on whether you see that as well. Maybe I'm just imagining things out here in the middle of Missouri, but nonetheless, something to keep in mind. Advantage. And then finally, and then I'll open it up for any initial thoughts or questions. Is vision, right? So when it comes to future proofing your fundraising, I think AI really gives you the ability to look ahead and imagine what's possible. Again, I mentioned earlier, I think the only ceiling on growing the pie of funding, on growing your impact with an extension, is imagination. And some of the most exciting things that I see happening in industries like agriculture, which is where my deepest background lies, are when we have federal agencies, state agencies, extension professionals, nonprofits, corporations getting together and developing wholly new pools of opportunity, money, resources, boots on the ground, helping farmers do specific things in the field. Um, and, I've been part of some of those conversations, and they take time, they take effort. But man, the ability to think about, using AI to do an analysis of the latest publicly available reports from the Federal Reserve or from USDA or, globally available resources, places like India and Brazil. Like, what can we see in the data about commodity markets, logistics, insurance, and using AI as a tool to sort of, even if you can't see into the future, begin to sort of connect some dots, maybe some patterns or some trends that, because AI can look at so much so quickly, AI very well will likely jump to some incorrect conclusions, but it may get your gears turning around how AI could help you design programs, think about what your clients are going to be needing, not just, tomorrow, but in 6 to 12 months or more, but then also being super flexible, right? I see lots of organizations, including my own, that used to think about, I'm going to make my 1 year strategic plan or a 3 year strategic plan. And anymore, I really question how valuable those kinds of exercises are beyond just sort of maybe making a basic roadmap, right? The world is changing so quickly that, uh, especially in fundraising, right? Again, when we have this rapid proliferation of AI, we have people sort of overwhelmed trying to figure out, how do I use tools to screen grant applications and write grant applications? And, the funding landscape is changing at maybe a federal level or a state level. And so we're having to adapt and pivot. That really vision often means like, what am I doing next month? Or what are we doing in the next 3 months based on what we're learning, how AI is changing, how the marketplace is changing, what our clients are telling us. And so I think it's always going to be this give and take between what are you hearing in your local community, what are you hearing from other extension professionals who are in business development and fundraising, and then what novel insights, or maybe not novel, but what insights can AI help me surface that would take me hours of research, study on my own. And again, don't trust it at the outset, verify, but use it as a way to complement those other sources of insight that you have at your disposal. All right, I'm going to stop there. That's sort of what I see when it comes to what fundraising means in terms of future proofing. Let me stop there and ask, is this tracking? If this is making sense, just drop the number 1 in the chat. If it's not, just say no or huh, or Nate, you're going off in left field, and that will tell me to maybe step back and clarify. All right, I'm seeing some number 1s in the chat. Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for that and for keeping me honest. I appreciate it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, what is changing in AI. And again, for many of you, if you spend any time reading the news or following AI, these will not be a lot of new information, nor may it be exhaustive at all. But I think these insights are helpful, at least for me, sort of wrapping my head around, okay, how is the landscape changing? Even if I don't know what this means for extension or for fundraising today, maybe it helps me, do some blue sky thinking on a rainy day. So, a short list here. So let's start from the left. So reasoning, right? More and more, the large language models, again, Gemini, Chat, Claude, they have these reasoning capabilities, right? So they're shifting from a chatbot that can give me fast answers to a thinking partner that is able to really, comb through the questions and the context of what I'm sharing, connect dots, identify patterns, and help me really become a strategic thinking partner. We talked about that pretty extensively several sessions ago. Number 2, multimodal, right? So it used to be that if I had a bunch of hand scrawled notes from a conference, for example, or from a meeting where we were talking about a grant proposal, for example, and I took a screen grab of that and uploaded it to Chat GPT, that the AI didn't do a great job of reading my handwriting and turning that into text. And I would say that in some cases still today, it still struggles there, but man, it's gotten way better. And so AI has the ability to ingest text, images, video, audio, And I mean, eventually, with the advent of robotics, which we'll talk about in a moment, AI will have the capacity to ingest, real-time information from the field, from the surrounding world. Obviously, this happens already in industries like mining and agriculture and anything that has a sensor attached to it. Again, I think it opens up the possibilities not just to take in information that maybe you collect and that historically you would have had to transcribe in writing, or it would have been really clunky to take all of these disparate data sources and use that to inform the decisions you're making in partnership with AI. That synthesis has never been easier, and it's only going to get better. And then on the reverse end of that, when it comes to what AI can produce, I mean, the biggest difference I've noticed as someone who does a lot of, professional development is the ability for large language models to produce coherent, logical, aesthetically pleasing PowerPoint presentations. That's like a very concrete example. But in the past, I would have basically worked with AI to sort of say, here are my talking points. Here's kind of how I'm thinking about organizing things. I'd like you to come up with copy, like text that I can copy and paste onto individual slides. Well, now I can really just give it, this is what I want. This is kind of what I'm thinking about, and it can literally generate the whole presentation for me. And I do this in Chat GPT, but you could probably pick any of the platforms. And 3 to 5 minutes later, I have the whole thing built out. uh, Obviously, you got to watch for AI speak. Sometimes the formatting is messed up, but it is shockingly good. And so, again, think about the same for I want to make a video, or I want to create a poster presentation, or I want to come up with a marketing kit for this new initiative that we're trying to raise funding for, right? Or I'm preparing for this event and I need handouts and printouts and posters. And again, all of those things, you basically have an events team, a fundraising team, a media team in your back pocket. So multimodal is, again, only going to get better. And it's, again, something that the sky's the limit in terms of how to repurpose those resources. Agents. Hear a lot about agents. Again, this is a space that I am not an expert in, but agents are basically AI tools that are sort of working in partnership together, doing things like going out on websites and shopping for you, or buying groceries, or maybe placing inquiries on certain websites about like what is the tax code for this particular location, and how do I file taxes and by when. And again, agents are going to make things allow you to get a lot more work done faster. And again, AI agents cannot just, do maybe a 5-second task, but there are AI agents that can work for many minutes, hours. And again, the more time you can give an AI to do work that you might normally hand to another person. For a lot of us, we don't have that luxury of a lot of extra people to be able to partner with. And so again, AI agents, you start to get into some questions around like cybersecurity and ethics. Like, for example, I am still very hesitant to connect my ChatGPT account to like my Google Drive, for example, or my Dropbox files, because there's, ample media reports and research showing that AIs can act in ways that are unpredictable. And so information that I want to be confidential or proprietary could potentially become public. And so again, I think, as we start to have these agentic AI tools that are going to do things on our behalf, we really need to ask a lot of questions. And I would argue that, at least at today's juncture, I don't see a lot of value for extension for the agents yet, other than maybe folks like Extension Foundation, which is doing a lot of really pioneering work, building large language models trained specifically on extension research. If you had a partner like Extension Foundation experimenting with agents, then I would have a high degree of confidence, because it's experimental. They're going to have very clear ethics and guardrails around that. So whether it's through Extension Foundation or other industry partners that you respect and trust, I would much prefer to go through something like that, like a membership-driven group or an association, rather than sort of going out on my own and hoping for the best, because it is kind of the Wild West right now. Number 4, customization. So if you've ever built something like a custom GPT, or like a little mini chatbot that is trained on, maybe here's how I write my grant proposals, or here's how my email voice sounds. Can you help me replicate that and write a new email with that in mind? That's really what I mean by customization. One thing I've noticed using LLMs is that because I have a paid subscription, I've used lots of had conversations, uploaded, content, and used it to build proposals and write letters and things like that. Um, the AI is starting to be rather presumptuous, and so maybe that would be my caution here. Is like, on the one hand, when it comes to writing fundraising appeals, knowing your arm of extension, what you specialize in, your theory of change. AI isn't awesome at really like helping you be a second brain to make that information immediately available. And then that information informs everything you write or produce thereafter, right? So you're not having to start from scratch and explain extension does this, and this is my role, and this is what I'm trying to do. You can give it more basic details because it's been previously trained on your information. That said, sometimes the AI will want to jump to conclusions or give you advice, and as you go through it, it may sound good the first time through, but I encourage you always read through what it's telling you a second time, because I'm finding lately, especially in Chat GPT, that it's rather than sort of engaging me in conversation, it's sort of jumping to a bunch of conclusions and giving me advice on what I need to do, especially with these reasoning capabilities. And so I think maybe that's a caution for all of us, is that, customization is great, reasoning is great, but I'm the person and I know my needs better than anyone. So if you're not going to be able to help me do that, then I'm going to have to take my fundraising planning to a traditional Microsoft Word document or a pen and paper, right? Number 5 is world models. So increasingly, AI labs are looking at ways to begin getting more real-time data from the outside world. So an example of this would be, you can think about Waymo or Uber or some of the or Tesla, some of the car companies that are working on automated driverless cars, things of that nature. And they have sensors and cameras on them that are really ingesting information from all around the vehicle in real time. And one of the goals of the AI labs is to be able to do this for everything, right? So, because you're basically working with training a computer doesn't have arms and legs, it doesn't have eyes like you and I do. And so the goal is, how do we equip machines with those kinds of sensory capabilities to be able to predict like what happens when a glass of water tips over, right? And how do we, if you looked at a lot of the old AI generated videos, you had weird things like, hands passing through walls and, the water sitting halfway in the glass and halfway outside of it. And so, the goal of all of this is to sort of pair the real world with AI to be able to prepare for things like robotics, which is our next point, right? So how do we bring AI, the AI brain that can do really impressive work on a computer, and bring that into the real world, whether it's manufacturing cars or cleaning my house or driving my car. And so again, robotics, again, I don't see a big application for extension yet, other than obviously in terms of career development. And if you're encouraging your students or people you mentor to go into certain jobs, robotics is probably a pretty exciting space to be in over the next decade. And some people say the AIs we're developing now will be sufficient for everything. And others say it's going to take a really giant leap before robots can really interface with the world like a human does. So the verdict is out, but again, something to keep in mind as far as what's changing. And then finally, energy and infrastructure. And I hear this a lot from my extension friends. They get a lot of questions about, water impact, electricity, power bills, all those kinds of things, sound pollution, light pollution, et cetera. And so, again, there's all kinds of wild conversations happening right now. Certainly, data centers being built in lots of different places. Different states are coming up with different protocols. Some are banning them. Some are inviting them in with open arms. Some are making them pay for their own power or building their own power grids. There's even discussions about building data centers or power facilities in the ocean or in outer space and like orbiting as satellites. So using fusion technology to be able to have lots of energy with maybe lower impact. So again, I don't think anyone knows exactly where this is all headed, but something to keep in mind as the future happens. And again, a lot of these conversations are going to be happening in places that extension serves, right? pardon me, both urban areas, but especially I think rural ones, right? Because that's where the land base exists for big infrastructure investments like data centers. Other things to keep in mind, government intervention and regulation. We've seen that a lot. There was actually an interesting article published today by Axios talking about the fact that in the last 5 weeks, basically every single top executive at the large language model companies, ChatGPT, Google, Anthropic, Meta, et cetera, everyone's publishing these public letters basically saying we need a formal government agency infrastructure that crosses all of our companies that allows us to begin figuring out how do we keep these increasingly powerful AI tools in the best interests of humanity, workers, et cetera. And again, that's a big Pandora's box, and I'm not going to open it today, but it's something to really pay attention to because, again, we've seen even recently some new capabilities come online for you and I, and then they're taken back, right? Because there's a security concern. And so just pay attention to that. Again, follow your institution's guidelines. I think that goes without saying. But again, I suspect there's going to be a combination of state guidelines, federal rules, most of which won't affect you and I at all. But there may be, access to AI tool issues, right? There may be specific types of applications that AI can't be used for, or who knows what. So just keep that in mind. Again, something else to keep in mind, very practical, that's not on this list is just cost, right? AI companies are using a ton of money and the revenues aren't there yet. And so I would expect that many of the AI companies are going to be ratcheting up the price of admission to use their tools. And so, I would say use what you can now and, be in active conversation with whoever manages the budget within your institution in terms of access, licenses, volunteer to be on committees or people who are sort of discussing this, because again, to keep prolonged access and have the best capabilities possible, there's probably going to be some conversation, negotiation, et cetera, that has to be had. A few other details, public backlash. Again, I sort of sit in two worlds, the business world, and then also I'm an author and creative outside of work. And in the creative community among authors, artists, performers, there is a lot of not just, frustration with AI, but outright rage. And I say that with all the love and respect in the world, and I completely empathize with that. And so I think as extension, because of the role you have as communicators, as trust builders, I do think that there is probably both a real practical opportunity to help your communities sort of wayfind through the next several months and years that are going to be more different than anything we've probably ever experienced as a society. And then secondly, I also think there's probably opportunities from a fundraising standpoint, right? So be thinking about, are there organizations in my community that are starting to ask questions about AI, or maybe people in my community, leaders or funders, or are there foundations or corporations that I'm seeing start to make an investment in higher education or in nonprofits that are maybe providing training or resources or education to people on AI? Because I do think this is no longer going to be just a sort of an existential question, but it's going to become a political question. It's going to become a, how do we get along with each other in society? How do we do our work in the AI age? Like, whose jobs stay and whose jobs shift? And so again, I think there are all kinds of ways in which extension can be an asset, and also use this moment as an opportunity to say, are there fundable programs, resources, services that extension is uniquely qualified to provide? And again, it may not be that you go out and find those opportunities published on a website somewhere, or you get an inquiry from a funder. I would encourage you to think about, are there opportunities extension can create from the ground up, right? Is there a way that either at building some sort of a national coalition, maybe working with a couple of states in a region, or perhaps even in my local county or my state, is there a way that my unique extension experience, the unique set of skills and expertise we have in extension, can be an asset here? And can we build a vision for something we can then go seek funding for? So consider that. Again, future of education and jobs. I don't think anyone knows what's happening. You've heard people say all the jobs, the white collar jobs are going away, and then the robots are going to come for the manufacturing jobs. You've heard people say, well, all the claims about AI taking over are overblown. I honestly have no idea where I stand on this question. And so I think it's just important to be proactive, pay some attention to what's happening in the national conversation. But I think the bigger focus is really these big drivers of change in AI that will inform, what happens in the future. And again, there is no dedicated entity I'm aware of today, other than maybe a handful of think tanks, thinking about the future of education and jobs. And again, extension as a unique workforce development engine, among other many capabilities that you offer, you know, I think this could be a great place for Extension to continue to step up and say, we want to help lead this shift in a way that's best for people, best for local families, best for local communities. And then finally, supply chain reshoring, which what I mean by this is some of you are aware that where locations where chips and other important AI infrastructure is manufactured are the supply chain is very, very, I would say, brittle, right? So places like Taiwan, for example, that also happen to be a political flashpoint, are important for some of the most high-end chips in the world. There are efforts in some places in the U.S. to bring more of that AI manufacturing, into the United States. But again, I think it's important to be aware of geopolitics and global events because, again, just because everyone has all these plans to build out all of this infrastructure, if I don't have access to the raw materials and the manufacturing expertise to build them, that changes the equation a lot. So again, nothing that Extension can control or that it needs to be deeply worried about whatsoever, but just things to keep in mind, right? I think the takeaway here is that it is a volatile, changing landscape. What you all do best within Extension should continue to be your mandate, which is focusing on serving local communities, businesses, and specifically in your case, bringing more funding and resources into Extension to help those client bases that you serve. Again, using the AI capabilities available to you, but also not getting locked into gridlock or a deer in the headlights that this is just so big and overwhelming, we don't know what to do or where to start. All right, let me stop there. I'm going to transition to my next slide, but while I do that, I'm curious if you have a comment or a thought, drop into the chat. What else do you see? What other trends or factors are you watching in the world of AI that you think will be a big deal in the future? So go ahead, I'll take a minute and then we'll move on to the next slide. I know I've given you a ton to process, so think about it. If you have a thought, feel free to drop those in the chat. Yeah, Tiffany, ethical use of AI. That's a huge one, right? I hear people saying we shouldn't use AI at all. It was trained on stolen data. I hear other people saying let's like leverage the snot out of it because there's so much goodness here. It can help me just work so much faster and better. Yeah, James, international competition. Carol says ethical use of AI. 100%, right? How do we live in this complex global world and balance ethics and security and public safety and public health and environmental well-being? So yeah, so many great ideas here. Thank you so much for sharing those. So let me just sort of run through these real quickly, and then we'll sort of move into just broader Q&A and conversation. So what does this mean for your fundraising workflow? Well, again, we've talked about a lot of this extensively, so I won't belabor the point today. But I think for your fundraising workflows, what it means is, faster research, right? I can synthesize this very complex landscape we've kind of walked through this afternoon. That helps me be as informed as possible, right? I can never have all of the data. I can never have all the information, but wow, do I have more access than ever before to relevant, access to peer-reviewed research, access to, press releases and insights from experts around the world that I can use to build and inform my grant proposals, et cetera. Personalized outreach, right? So AI is going to enable you to really customize your conversations with funders, really understand them at a deeper level. What are their goals? What have they funded in the past? who are their leaders and what are their priorities. So again, being able to really understand that deeply and then be empathetic in your correspondence with funders has never been more possible than with AI. Automated reporting. So what I mean by this is really taking data and insights from the work that Extension is doing and extracting meaning from that at a deeper level in a way that's faster and more effective for your limited time at work every day. And then strategic modeling. And what I mean by this is working with AI and saying, hey, and by the way, I have a worksheet that all of you will get for attending today's session. And it's got a series of prompts on there. Again, I wasn't going to go through a lot of them today simply because these are more like philosophical kinds of things or things that you're really going to have to customize to your own unique situation. Um, but I would encourage you to say, hey, I've got the chance to use Claude Cowork, for example, right? This sort of agentic capability within Claude, and my institution is paying for it, but I have no idea where to begin. So let me explain to you in my extension role what I do. And then I want you to help me think about 3 possible use cases for Claude Cowork and predict which of those use cases would help me achieve my goals, either my funding goals faster or raise more money or work with the best fit funders out there. So again, use AI not just to say I'm doing my day-to-day job, but also to think ahead a couple of steps and really predict for you what avenue could I explore out of all the possibilities of AI? Give me the one place to focus today and then try it, right? And AI might be wrong, right? It might be a waste of a 30-minute time. On the other hand, you might learn something really fantastic and you might be able to use it right away, or you might sort of put it in a file on the back shelf and then pull it down in a month when you get ready to submit that next proposal. So I think these are some core benefits. And again, I think all these are fairly straightforward, but it doesn't hurt to repeat them. Okay, so I'm going to skip this slide. Basically, the purpose of this is to say, I always encourage, and I've said this before, but if you have the ability to use a couple of tools like Cowork and Gemini or ChatGPT and Claude, if you have the luxury to sort of, use the same prompt and the same exact information in 2 different platforms, experiment with what you get back, right? Because again, in light of all of the new capabilities we've just talked about, your experience on ChatGPT today could be very different than your experience tomorrow because beneath the scenes, people at these labs are constantly tinkering, right? It feels to you like a static experience because the user interface, the website that you're looking at, hasn't changed a whole lot. But behind the scenes, there's a whole lot changing. And so consequently, it's important to understand day to day, your user experience may differ. And so consequently, having more than one tool in the toolbox allows you to achieve whatever goal you have for fundraising and business development that day. So again, make a test. I would just say, take a prompt that you're using, plug it into 2 different platforms and see what hit enter and see what happens and do some things while you're looking at the output, right? See what reasoning it supposedly had coming up with the recommendations that it makes. Look at how it's structured. How does the information look? When it comes to your personal working style and how your brain is wired, do you prefer this output or that output? And why? Just like ask yourself, these are kind of these metacognitive conversations that I would encourage you to have. I think too many people, and I'm not certainly thinking this is true of extension, but I hear a lot of people sort of use AI or like, this experience wasn't great, or it's so dumb, it doesn't know anything. Oftentimes it's because the prompt and the conversation and the context you provided was too narrow. But B, it's also about not taking what you get on the first run at face value and really diving deeper and asking, okay, if this didn't work, why didn't it work? And how could I get a better result next time? And then finally, again, understanding that different tools are going to be a good fit for different tasks and being okay with that, right? It may be that your institution only has one that you're authorized to use, and that's okay. There's a ton of horsepower even in a single one of these tools. If you have the luxury to use more than one, just recognize that it gives you a little more flexibility to experiment and see what works best for you and your workflow. Okay, so let's take maybe a step up and let's talk about just adopting a new AI tool or capability. And I saw the comment about ethics come up several times. And I think this is really what I would call the AI adoption framework, with a very strong ethical lens, right? So these are some of the criteria I would encourage you to walk through anytime you're thinking about using a new capability, you're getting ready to run an experiment, you've got a funding opportunity, and you're thinking about where can I plug in AI to be the best fit for me. The first question to ask is around authorization, right? What are my institution's guardrails? What tools do we have access to? What is the university already paying for that I can access? And is there any training, additional resources I need to study up on before diving in, right? Even better, is there an individual person within Extension or within my university that I can talk to directly with specific questions, right? I talk a lot about the book Who Not How, um, and by Dan Sullivan. And the purpose of that book is to say 9 times out of 10, the fastest way to get educated on something and to move forward is to find a person to learn from and to act on, not trying to become the expert yourself, right? Now, AI, I think, gives us a little more fun and freedom to like learn things on our own, which is one of the reasons I really enjoy using it. But time is of the essence, so you don't always have that luxury. So authorization, number one, make sure you're following your institution's guardrails. Um, and frankly, your own ethical and moral guardrails, right? There are going to be times when maybe you have a personal, you struggle with using something. So I would encourage you, acknowledge that you have that concern, right? Feel it in your nervous system. If it gives you a pit in the bottom of your stomach, or you feel like your heart raising in your throat, maybe it's time to like label that as like, I don't know about this. Like, I know other people are doing it, but I personally have some concerns. Number two, I would say, in terms of personal authorization, have a conversation, right? Find someone you trust, maybe another extension peer, maybe someone who uses AI in other capacities, just a dispassionate third party. But talk through some of those things. I mean, obviously, you can read about it. You can use AI to discuss sort of the pros and cons. But again, you need to be sure that you're doing your job as effectively as possible, obviously. And core to all of that is your own ethical compass and that of your institution. Number two, impact, right? So what specific outcomes will be vastly improved by leveraging this AI tool system process, right? So really, I would always think about, rather than just, I'm going to use AI for everything, which can work, how is AI going to help me deliver vastly improved outcomes, right? And I included that word vastly because, incremental benefit is great, but I can get incremental benefit from Googling something on a standard Google search, right? So what is AI going to do that's going to compound the value that I'm adding, whether it's putting together a funding proposal, convening a number of funders to have a strategic conversation, whatever the case might be. So impact, number two. Number three, risks, right? What are the risks we have to assess, right? The potential for error. Again, the potential for a breach of trust, privacy breaches, loss of human judgment, loss of critical thinking. And again, I think reputation is also something that should be thrown into this bucket, because I've started to hear people saying, "Hey, this sounds too much like AI. Can you just give me your thoughts, your own thoughts, right?" Um, and that's important to be vulnerable like that, because there is a real risk that if we give everything over to AI, we're going to not only lose out on a funding opportunity potentially, but we're going to lose out on trust, which is far harder to build back. Number four, cost, right? Is the price, in terms of the cost of the license, any training that might be necessary, the time I'm going to invest, is it sustainable? Is it worthwhile? And then readiness, right? How are we going to train and prepare to get good use from this AI tool or capability, right? Do we have time to run yet another experiment, or do we need to hold off and really finish what we've started and then move on to something else in the fourth quarter, for example, or whenever it makes sense again? Okay, a few other things to think about. Accuracy when it comes to testing AI tools, assuming you've gone through these parameters and you say, yes, this AI tool or capability checks these boxes. Then I would move to the next step and say, okay, when we're actually trying to work with the tool, what is the experience like as an extension professional working on business development and fundraising? So is it accurate, right? How often is it hallucinating? When I call it out and say, hey, that's not right, try again, is it actually working to remedy the problem, or is it just getting worse? Output quality and reliability, right? So again, if you're able to compare tools or capabilities, you're likely going to gravitate toward one or the other, depending on the use case. And so you need to rely on tools that aren't just sort of occasionally helpful, but are consistently helpful over a long period of time. User experience, right? Is it understandable? Is it clear to me? And then customization capacity. Can I build my own tools? Can I provide it some additional context or training within my context of extension to make it more valuable to me? And then things like privacy and security, interoperability. Does it work well with other tools we use within extension? Can I get the proper support and training? And environmental impact. I mean, this is a short list, but these are some of the things that I would be thinking about that I hear come up time and again in conversations. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pause. We've got about 7 minutes to go in the regular session, then we'll take 15 minutes after the top of the hour for Q&A. As we are wrapping up the presentation and moving into Q&A, a couple of thoughts. Number one, I would love to have any questions, comments, observations that you've made in the chat. I really want this to be helpful to you. I know I've gone through a lot of material today, but again, my focus today, as we're wrapping up this series, was to give you some really concrete frameworks and criteria to consider. Because again, we're all working within this landscape that's changing so quickly. And I'm hopeful that the trainings and examples and prompts I've given you this year are going to serve you really well in 2026 and beyond. And I also know that the capabilities are going to change a lot, even between now and next year. And so I want you to have the ability to sort of pivot and adapt with these core pillars in place. So I will keep talking, but again, please go ahead and start dropping those comments in the chat. If for some reason you have to leave or want to leave at the top of the hour, absolutely okay. There will be a quick survey that pops up from Extension that we'd love for you to help answer. And that'll just give the Extension Foundation team feedback on this presentation, this series, so we can make it better and more effective for you in the future. Tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't, and what you'd like to learn next. All right. So moving on. I will do a little demo now while I'm waiting for questions. And so this is the prompt. Basically, let's vet a new AI tool. And you are going to act as a cooperative extension technology and risk review advisor. Evaluate this tool using these resources, right? Credible current online sources covering purpose, fit with extension workflows, key risks, notable alternatives, and a clear recommendation. Should I adopt this? Should I pilot it? Or should I wait? Cite sources in line and flag any claims that cannot be verified. So I'm going to minimize this screen, and we're going to bump over to ChatGPT. I'm going to type this prompt in. And the tool that I've chosen for today is sort of a capability. I'm going to say Claude Cowork, right? We mentioned Claude Cowork earlier. It's this agentic capability within Anthropic's Claude large language model that allows you to automate workflows, right? Go out and do my shopping on Amazon, or build this research report for me, or design these 3 PowerPoint presentations. And so I'm just going to hit enter, and we'll see what it says for us here. Again, the purpose of this demo is simply to say, when you encounter questions like this in your role as an extension fundraiser, and you're trying to figure out like, hey, I saw this new thing pop up in my Copilot account, or I saw this headline, like, what does this mean for me? This is a way to start that process. Because the reasoning feature is turned on, I have noticed that some of these discussions are taking longer because the AI is thinking and pulling things together. But it looks like it's actually pulled something together for us. Okay, so its conclusion is that this should be a pilot because parts remain in beta. It's not yet ready for system-wide adoption. A tightly controlled pilot using a contracted team or enterprise environment is justified. Over here, it's pulling out the sources. So it's looking up a bunch of support websites on the Claude website. It's looking at some information from, I'm not sure if that's Virginia Tech or a university here. And then it's sort of saying, okay, here's the executive assessment. Here's where the value could be. Here's the maturity of the product, right? Is it new, or has it been in the marketplace for a long time? All the way down to how much of a fit is it for extension, right? So it could be great for internal productivity. It's probably not great for helping us give the public advice without strong validation by human beings. Then it's going to explain what is the purpose of this tool, how does the tool work. So again, this would be a great way to figure out, like, give me like a primer on what exactly is the purpose of this tool that I'm just learning about now. Then it's going to walk you through limitations. And again, this prompt is in the handout that you'll get at the conclusion of today's workshop. Um, and then possible use cases, right? So again, my advice here is not go out and do this, right? You obviously need permission, you need your institution's blessing, but assuming you had, an interested group of people, you had the authority of the extension system or within your specific university to do this, here are some ideas, right? You could turn public program records into annual report narratives and just see what they look like, right? You could organize public documents into a searchable project collection. Here are some other use cases for Claude Copilot, or rather Claude Cowork. You should only do after appropriate approvals, right? Legal, security, etc. So analyzing participant level program data, transcribing stakeholder meetings, etc. And then don't ever include these things in pilots, things like youth data, personnel actions. I mean, like, a lot of these are obvious, but it's just helpful to think things through. It goes through and says, okay, these are the risks you may face along the way. Here are the consequences potentially for extension, loss of trust. Again, I didn't say trust in my prompt, but it intuited that. These are the kinds of things you would need. You need subject matter review and source verification, right? Confidentiality breaches. These are the consequences. These are the things you would need to do to make sure controls are in place to mitigate this risk, and so on. And then it gives you alternatives, right? So here are some other tools you could use that might achieve some of the similar features. I love that it featured extension bots. So for the recording, to Aaron and the team at Extension Foundation, AI is picking up on the work you're doing with extension bots. So kudos, keep it up. And then it talks about, like, what could a pilot look like, right? Unverified or vendor only claims. So don't believe these things unless you verify it to be true for yourself, right? So these are things that are designed to keep extension and universities out of trouble. And then it gives an overall recommendation. Don't adopt it institution-wide. Focus on a pilot. If there is a specific gap you're trying to fill, you have the necessary ethical and compliance boxes checked, etc. So I hope that's helpful. That's just an example of how you might use that one of the prompts from the worksheet that you're going to get to really, like, put this to use for yourself, right, in fundraising, and really start thinking about future proofing with the benefits of some of these new capabilities that are coming online. All right, we'll skip agents. We've talked about that. We've talked about limitations. Okay, so here's a very specific question, right? I'm not seeing any general questions in the chat, but I would be curious to know, like, within to the degree that you feel comfortable sharing, what is AI adoption like for you personally, or within your university, or within your area of extension? So are there lots of early adopters? Is there confusion? Is there resistance to it? I'm just curious to kind of get a feel for the landscape of what you're seeing, because again, what I'm observing in the general public and among, entrepreneurs and businesses is that there is a hugely diverse spectrum of opinion and utility. And I'm curious if that's the case in extension as well. So maybe if you're comfortable sharing, great. If not, I totally understand. But I'll leave that question up for a moment. What is adoption like in your neck of the woods? And what are the biggest objections or hurdles you've encountered? I'm going to take a quick drink, and then we'll dive into our Q&A. Carmel, thank you so much for your comment. Diverse opinions, the largest concerns now revolve around data centers, 100%. I definitely see that here in my neck of the woods in Missouri. And it's a political question, it's an environmental question, it's a workforce development question, and I don't have answers for sure, but it's definitely something that is causing a lot of conversation, and I think extension can be a great neutral third party at helping those conversations and dialogue happen. Because again, nobody has this figured out. There's nobody nobody's asleep at the wheel. There's nobody at the wheel, right? This is all happening sort of in parallel tracks. And so I think it's our job to sort of be able to step up and say, hey, we can provide education, we can provide resources, training, context, research, and and again, just be a local locus of trust, which I think is probably the most important of all at a time of a lot of distrust in society. Love that. Thank you so much. All right. So to summarize, as we're sort of rounding the corner here and looking for other questions, when do I adopt a tool or a capability? When do I wait? Right? We looked at that prompt that maybe gives you some coaching on specific tools. At a high level, a pilot would be, hey, we found something we think could have a huge impact for extension or our clients, or hugely increase the odds, the ability of ourselves to submit more funding proposals, for example, or meet with more funders, or scale this big event we're organizing and get the proper sponsorship funding to make it happen. So high potential risk, high potential impact. The risk is manageable, right? Like we know the guardrails, we have clear ethics and institutional guidelines in place. And we know it's going to need some testing, right? So we're going to start on a small scale, get the proper approvals, and give it a shot, right? I think you move to the adoption phase when you've identified that, in fact, we've piloted this tool or capability. The risk, again, as best we can determine, is relatively low, and we can mitigate any existing risks that remain. It's going to be extremely efficient, right? It's not going to take up more time and bandwidth and resources than it gives back to us. Like the ROI is going to be high, and it has a clear utility, right? It adds something to what we're already doing. It doesn't distract. It doesn't duplicate, etc. And then, of course, weight would be it's high risk. The security is unproven. The ethics are just way off the charts or so unknown that we're not even willing to wade in those waters right now. And redundant features, right? And I think this is going to be a struggle probably for a lot of these companies over the next several years, is that as these large language models get bigger and bigger, that AI startup environment is probably going to start to consolidate, right? Because tools that, capabilities that a startup tool, maybe it's a video editing tool, or maybe it's like an AI voice generation software that translates your voice into other languages. My suspicion is that any of these big tools are going to have all those capabilities. And so, as we've seen with the internet and other, ebbs and flows of the markets, I think it's important to keep testing your tools and seeing, are there ways to save money in our business development efforts? Because maybe we have 5 subscriptions and we really only need 2. Or like, again, just finding new ways to build tools in-house, like what Extension Foundation has done with Extension Bot. So again, I think having access to that proprietary insight, peer-reviewed research, trustworthy extension information, the more that, AI tools can be built by the experts based on that trusted information, rather than only relying on whatever is coming out of Silicon Valley, really, really valuable. So again, most of us, including myself, are not computer programmers or AI scientists, but become friends with those people because they could really help you, again, bringing some of those tools and capabilities in-house versus being only reliant on the large language models. All right, I have a brief survey here as we're wrapping up today. This just helps me personally, so be sure to focus on the Extension Foundation's version. But if you'd be so kind, I would be very grateful. I know this has been a months-long endeavor, and I'm always looking for your feedback. I absolutely love working with the extension community, and I always want to be additive rather than taking up your valuable time. So thank you so much. Scan the QR code or use this URL and code, and that will be so helpful to me. All right, we have got about 9 minutes left. I'm going to pause and say, Charlie, thank you so much for being our host today. Were there any comments, questions, insights you wanted to share as we're wrapping up today?
I think you covered so much, and there's just so much more that you can dive into. So, my whole thing lately has been don't feel overwhelmed and try to do it all. Find something that feels right and meets your need or might meet your need, and focus on that and like one thing at a time because it is changing so rapidly. Like, you just need to keep up with whatever you can.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice, Charlie. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right. Things are changing so much that the best we can do that you can do as an extension professional is like anchor in. I can do this today. Like I have this specific goal, this specific need. I have this specific curiosity, right? I think part of what I like about AI is that if you look at it the right way, it can be kind of fun, like to just kind of play around and see what's possible. Still be that skeptic, still be the critic, right? Still look for opportunities to be better and do better. Still apply that ethical lens, and just see what's possible. And like Charlie said, break it down to something that's super manageable and that's not overwhelming, but is going to be enlightening, if nothing else. Awesome. James, thanks for the kind words. I'm really happy to hear that you got some good tips about this and really appreciate Tiffany, your comments. Carol, it's been exciting for fundraising, like the brief discussion of landscape trust. Working with kids, it's important to help them understand this is a great tool and ethics is more important. Absolutely. I love that. Thank you all so much. Well, with that, I would encourage you to check out Extension Bot. I've got the link up here. If you just Google Extension Bot, you can check out the AI tool that Extension Foundation has been building. And then my contact information is here. Again, this is a wrap up for this year's series, although we're exploring possible other sessions for the future. So please, again, reach out, give us feedback, let us know what you'd like to learn in the future. And with that, we will wrap up today's session. But Charlie and Extension Foundation, thank you so much. And everyone who attended, so grateful for your engagement. Have a great rest of your summer, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.